Welcome to the Glucose Never Lies podcast. This is the second in the CGM series, and I am delighted to say I am joined by the three favourite ladies in the diabetes space, the Diabetes Specialist Nurse Forum. So we've got Beth, Amanda, and Tamsin. So do you want to introduce yourself, guys? I'm sure most people know you, but do you want to sort of say hello?
Yeah, shall I go first? So my name's Amanda Williams, also known as Epps in a previous life, and I am a lead diabetes nurse in East Kent.
Name's Beth. I'm the clinical lead diabetes specialist nurse in Wiltshire.
Hi, my name's Tamsin Fletcher-Salt, and I am the lead diabetes specialist nurse at the University Hospital in North Midlands.
Perfect. So obviously they're the official titles, but usually everyone who comes on the Glucose Never Lies is a backstory to how the first time you kind of meet and get along with people, and only good people who are a laugh come on the show as well. But I met these properly in the ATTD, must have been 2024, around a manufacturer's night out, which was such a good laugh, and we was drinking plenty of cocktails. I think it was espresso martinis were the order of the day. And then we got into a conversation, about continuous glucose monitoring. And I guess they probably didn't know that they had a comparison chart, which is brilliant for comparing all of the devices that were available on the features that they have and the bits and pieces. And me being an absolute nerd on data and things like that, I was like, I'm missing something on the front layer about kind of whether it's actually got data to kind of thing. It's like, yeah, but it's got CE marking. It's got indications for people. It's like, okay, let me begin. And then obviously got on my soapbox for a little bit. But I want to take you back to sort of those conversations before that, when you was putting your chart together, which is very well received. What was your thought process around that? You're obviously trying to provide something for the nursing community to show them about continuous glucose monitoring. So I don't know who's the best person to answer that.
So the idea behind it was just to allow nurses to understand the differences between the CGMs, because there were so many coming on the market with different features. And so we wanted people to know, how many days does it last? Is it licensed in certain groups, children, pregnancy, that kind of thing, and all the kind of features that go with it, so that people could make an informed choice. And also for people with diabetes, not just nurses, to make an informed choice about what the features were that they liked. Obviously, now we know better about the data and whatnot. But at the time, it was a handy chart looking at features.
Yeah, I mean, it still is more than a handy chart from that perspective, because it allows people to see what alarms things have. Like you say, the length of it's how long it lasts, the interoperability with different devices. So actually, it's extremely useful, because if you're thinking, well, we like this device, or these are the offerings that we've got in our area that's on formulary, there isn't one size fits all. You need to be able to understand what's available so you can meet the needs of the people you serve. And I guess then sort of when we had conversations and I sort of said, look, you just can't trust CE marking, not because the devices with CE marking are not safe, just because you can't use that as a pass, like you could do with the blood glucose meter ISO standard. So I guess it just sometimes get mixed up, doesn't it? Kind of, something's got approval, so it must have the equivalent to like an ISO regulatory standard. But with CGM, there isn't anything like that. But you just assume that was the case. So what was your understanding of, if any, of CE marking at the time, or did you even know what that term meant? I don't know, Beth, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, I mean, I think we knew what CE marking meant, but I think the other thing that we had is MARD. And I suppose at the time that was a new term to DSNs, and that, like CGM, we were all learning about it from, its sort of existence in the NHS. So I suppose we were all working together as DSNs in 2018 when it kind of blew up. So we were all learning from then and having to just pick it up as we went along. So I would say CE marking, I think we're all kind of used to that because we're used to general things that we buy and understanding CE marking and stuff. But I suppose MARD was the other thing that came in, and we thought that was a trustworthy thing to put on the chart. We were looking at the MARD, all the training that we do with companies, a lot of that was based around the MARD, and we were told a MARD of this is really good. And so we were like, great, okay, we got our heads around that and just about understood it. And then, suddenly more and more of these things are coming to the market and you're just flooded with it. So when we met you, and we had an education fairly quickly, didn't we?
Yeah, I guess, yeah. I mean, the thing is, you joined the point where I think I've been 3 years deep into the weeds of actually getting to the bottom of CE marking and understand what it meant with CGM. And to find out that people could come, or manufacturers could come into our office where we have kids from the age of 2, have a device that's approved for insulin dosing, yet the only data they can provide you with is for people with type 2 diabetes and adults. And I was like this, just like the disconnect was so massive. I was like, that's got to be like, this just can't be right. But then when there's 3 or 4 other companies, you're like, this just is not okay. It's just not okay. So then I think from that point, I took a deep dive within there. But then when you've got the knowledge yourself, it's then kind of like, how can you explain it in a simple enough way? And it's really difficult because it's really complex in terms of study design and things that most people, number one, don't want to go through the pain of understanding it all. And also number 2 is like, how do you develop something that can be instantly recognized as, okay, fair enough, then that's kind of good enough. And I guess that's the journey we set out on together to kind of go, okay, so let's put a front end to this chart, because we know that CE marking alone is not going to be a clear indicator. We need something before you get to the features to say you're only allowed to look at the features if you've got data that's good enough for understanding the risk of insulin dosing, and then you can have a look at the features, but you've got to get past the first thing first. And then we said, okay, let's put a chart at the front of it. And then that's where the 3 o'clock in the morning started. for about 2 weeks straight, trying to work
For
out.
you.
Yeah, for me.
We were just getting messages at 5, maybe.
Yeah, when we wake up.
It was really interesting for me because I had all this knowledge in my head, and I was like, how do we distill this into something that most people working on the front line are going to understand? And that's where it's amazing to kind of have a sit down with yourselves and go, does this make sense? He's like, no, like that's like way too complicated. It's got to be simpler. And I was like, what about this? He's like, no, it's still too complicated. It's got to be simple. It's like, okay, I'm going to have to do a proper challenge to get it as down to 5 things that we could do. But then we eventually got there with a grid of sort of 5, and then we had a simple score at the end. And I guess you kind of didn't even need to know what the criteria were in some ways, as long as there was trusted people such as yourselves from the diabetes nursing community, obviously myself involved in the CGM accuracy, strong enough voice to say, look, this is just simple enough for you to kind of get a good understanding, which I think we sort of achieved towards the end. So Beth, you've got your hand up, so you've obviously got something to say about that.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I'm just interested, obviously you're a dietitian, we're nurses, like how much actual sort of research-based education you get in your undergrad training, because this is something that we raise quite a lot as nurses, in that we don't have much education in how to read research, how to read studies, how to understand all of this, like population design, that kind of stuff in studies. So like you said, it's trying to get that understanding of make that sort of stuff accessible to nurses, which is, I suppose, what we've tried to do with the chart now, and make it a lot easier. But I think something needs to be done about, these professions coming through, and we really need to be able to not just trusting what's put in front of us, oh, that must be fine, but actually asking these questions and understanding and analysing data and things, because I don't think it's something that certainly in undergrad training you're taught at all. So
yeah, I totally agree with that. I guess from my perspective, because I've been on the other side of things, I know what it's like. So I worked for a medical device company for 5 years, and it's like on that side of things, like when you're on the sales end, you get sold to you from the people above you. We've got this great product. This is the data. This is how you're going to go out and sell it. And this is sort of the study design, but they only tell you the good stuff. But because I'm a really nosy and nerdy, I used to be like, I don't think that's really true. Actually, I think that's a bit more to it than that. And I used to hate that because like he was trying to sell a story to the employees to kind of go out and, this is how we sell it. And it's all rah, 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 rah. I was like, yeah, I don't think I'm going to go into that consultant and say that, because I know I'm going to get torn to pieces, because that's like on dodgy ground. So I think there definitely needs to be within the education, I guess you have critical appraisal training, but a little bit more on it, especially with relevant things that you use, because no one wants to learn research design. It's so boring when it has nothing to do with what you actually do. But around CGM, it's pretty important. So I don't know, Tamsin, when you were seeing that chart come together for the first time, we're thinking about, okay, how many people with type 1 diabetes, what percentage readings in low and high, and have they had meal and insulin challenges? Had that ever been discussed with you by any of the companies coming before, or was it just like we've got this new product. It's got a mild less than 10%. And actually, we're cheaper than this. And we've got this. And we've got you a nice lunch. And, kind of, oh, yeah, we really love you. Blah, blah, blah. Is that kind of like how it used to go? Or how did your meetings used to go?
Pretty much 100% the latter. And like Beth said, I think that nurses aren't particularly taught to necessarily question people that are coming in like that. Maybe because it's, as a ward nurse, you don't tend to see those kind of people. You don't see reps really on wards, do you? Particularly if you do, it's because they're coming to train you on a new piece of equipment that the trust has already purchased, and they've gone through all of that process. So you don't have that need to question, why are we using that? Whereas I think as a specialist nurse, you should be doing that, but actually you've come from an environment where you've never done that. So how do you learn to do that until somebody says to you, wait a minute, why do you think that device is good, or why do you think that medication is good? So yeah, I think it was, as Beth and Amanda said, it was a bit of an eye-opener, because obviously we'd looked at the features that were useful, in a sense, useful for us, useful for patients, but actually we hadn't delved deeper into, actually, was that device actually, was the data there for what they were selling it for, which is obviously insulin administration, isn't it, in pretty much 100% of cases.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I think that's the bit that's it's really tricky, because I think when it used to be, when we had the Freestyle Libre 1 and we had even the Medtronic and the early Dexcoms, it was always a confirmatory finger prick to make the actual insulin dose. Now, whether people decided to do that or they didn't, that was their choice. But the reality was, that's the way it was taught, that's the way it was indicated for. But when it made that big leap to no longer need a finger prick and it's straight to insulin dosing from it, is amazing. It's absolutely like one of the best things in the world for people with diabetes. But also then the risk level goes from, you get taught that actually blood finger pricks that's the gold standard, and you can really trust that. We're going to say now that you can bypass that and go to the CGM. It does take the risk level, because you're getting these readings all the time. If you have significant errors for a long enough period of time, the consequence is very dangerous. So the level of data that you require then also should scale with that in terms of safety. It's a little bit like if you had a medication that was doing something benign and all of a sudden it was doing something that was very, very risky. You would have expected randomized control trials, like safety and efficacy studies and things like that. And these things are adjusting insulin doses, which arguably is one of the potentially the most dangerous self-administered medications. Yet you can get an indication for a kid from the age of 2 with data on adults with type 2 diabetes. Like, the mismatch is just, it's so wild that it sort of begs belief. And the early players within the market never did that. There was never a discrepancy between the data that they have and what indications they have. But all of a sudden, there was just overnight in 2019, 4 companies rolling out with insulin indications from the age of 2 with data. It was just like a tumbleweed. But then expecting you to go, well, and I remember one of the reps said to me, he's like, well, why don't we just try it? Why don't we just try it a couple and see what it's like? I said, if it was your kid, would you try it? Would you be putting your kid's life at risk of doing insulin dosing because we think it's good on adults with type 2 diabetes? I don't think you will. So, don't come in and say, just give it a go. You need to be have a bit more to do with that. So I had some interesting conversations over a few years, that's for sure. But yeah, I mean, it's been interesting to see how the chart has progressed. So we obviously released that first chart, which was really well received, and I think helped a lot of people get an understanding that maybe CE marking isn't what it says it. Well, it's not what it says it is. It just isn't a quality standard. So that kind of brought the conversation to light, and seemed like we'd got everything covered. But then there was a bit of a loophole within there, in the fact that you could get a score of 5 out of 5, but we didn't have an amount of data that you would need. So you could get a 5 out of 5 with as little as 10 people in the study, or as many as 300 people in the study. So that's kind of when we made an upgrade to the chart in this sort of January, and sort of said there has to be either at least 50 people in your study, or if it's going to be as low as 40, the number of data points that you have has to be really high for us to kind of be trustworthy, which is kind of like the final piece of making sure that the quality of the data is good, but there's also enough of it to make sure that the accuracy that we find from it is fairly generalizable to more than just a few people. And that obviously took it down to four main players, which was Dexcom, Abbott, Roche, and
Gosh.
Medtronic. Yeah. So they're the four that are currently on it. But I do have to say, I have seen off the record data ATTD that there'll be two other companies very soon in the next couple of months that will be joining that, which is fantastic. But like anything, the data has to be published first. And the way that I see it, it's a bit like catfishing. Kind of someone shows you something on the internet, a picture of him, and you're like, are you sure that looks like you? And you see him in real life, like, God damn, you put on 50 pounds since then. So I need to see the real thing first before I'm absolutely going to change the chart. But it's also encouraging, I think, that it's pushing companies to say, okay, there is going to be a basic bottom line standard that we're going to have to meet. And I think the chart that together we've managed to put out there has really helped people, at least get a baseline sort of sufficiency from there. So I guess with that kind of charts where it's at. We've got four main players, two about to join. And then that becomes the better question of, okay, now we've got this understanding, what do these devices actually do? And that's where the chart really comes into play. So you guys work in different places. You've probably got your favorites, or maybe that's on formula or whatever. I'm just interested, do you use in a range of them? Do you use some of them more than others? What kind of drives the CGM choice in your particular area for the patients that you see? So taking whichever turn you want. Like, Amanda, do you want to go first?
Yeah, so I think it's quite tricky. People get their favorites, don't they? And they kind of stick with what they know. The two main players are probably Abbott and Dexcom that people are used to using. I think Abbott probably more so. And so I find that nurses I work with will just use that. And they won't even look at anything else, even if it's got different features that might be better for that patient. They won't even look at anything else because they're used to that device and they're used to all the features. They're used to the platform. They know how to set it up. And they can be quite reluctant to use other devices. So I do feel quite sorry for CGM companies coming in, new CGM companies, because I think they've got their work cut out for them to kind of get into this market.
Yeah. So in your areas tends to be sort of more Abbott based, but then you've obviously got, I know you do a range of obviously hybrid closed loop systems. So presumably you've got some on Medtronic sensors, obviously some on the Dexcom as well. Beth, you've got your hand up. What is that similar to you or are you slightly
Yeah, I
different?
was just going to say it is pretty similar. And I suppose I'm in the community, so we do a range of bits and pieces as well. But I would say a lot of the kind of, we're trying to get primary care a bit more upskilled with CGM. And I would say they're quite reluctant to try other things as well, because I suppose Abbott have got the largest market. They've used that the most. They're very reluctant to use other platforms and have other logins. And we kind of just have to deal with it because we've got things that work with different pumps and that kind of stuff. But yeah, I would say similar to what Amanda said, we try and do it based on what the patient. So I would always have a range on the table and say this is what's available. And obviously let the patient choose and make those decisions. But yeah, similar as Amanda, really.
And you sort of obviously arrange the things then if you felt like there was a particular feature or a particular set of alarms that would be useful for that individual context, you would kind of like, look, this is, maybe the one that's kind of got the most benefit for you in that case. How about you, Tamsin?
Yeah, we're one of the ICB outliers that doesn't have CGM on policy for type 2s.
Okay.
So at the minute, we tend to use Libra, I would say, I think they've got like 87% of our market when it comes to type 1s and some type 2s, because obviously we were prescribing at some point, but then we have had to stop. Dexcom came in a bit later, didn't they? And I think that they just have not got, they just haven't been able to get a hold of the market really, because Libra is definitely there. And then although Libra 3 is obviously on FP10, we're not allowed to prescribe it on FP10, so it goes through supply chain. So all the other CGM, obviously Dexcom, G6, G7, Libra 3 Plus, all go through our supply chain. So that's the only way we can supply them. So we would only supply those for pump patients, really. And then I believe that CareSense have just gone on for us on formulary in the last few weeks. So obviously I am waiting for that data to come through to see whether it'll get the score to get on the chart. So yeah.
Well, if what I've seen comes out in the literature, I think you'll be fine. I think there'll be about a 5 pretty soon. So it's so interesting to hear you guys say that, because you've got different experiences, obviously, in the community. A lot of people with type 2 diabetes, I deal exclusively with people with type 1 diabetes, obviously, and we don't really have an issue because it just kind of comes from the hospital as opposed to FP10. So we get to choose kind of what we want as such, and most of ours have historically been on Dexcom, mainly for the reason that you can get optional calibration, particularly for school kids, because you obviously teach, if the kid feels different to what they're saying, do a finger prick, and then if you've got a discrepancy, you need some way to be able to close that discrepancy, because teachers do not like ambiguity between, well, what do I do here, what do I do there? So for us, obviously that's really helpful, but I can imagine for adults who don't really test the glucose level that often, it's like it's that's not really a big thing, but it's just so
Ever.
interesting to hear. But no, seriously, on a serious point, and this actually comes to the 2020 and 40/40, and it's a point that I made and author made really well in the last one, is kind of like, look, the 2020 performance, which is basically, if you've got the percentage of readings in 2020, that's a percentage of readings that would do absolutely a fantastic decision. You will not make a bad decision there. And all this current CGMs are anywhere between 90 to 95%. So pretty much exclusively very, very good insulin decisions. And then the percentage of readings above 40/40, which is way out, which is like more than 40% out, where you're going to make an error with either insulin dosing decision or a hypertrophy decision, is somewhere between 0.5% and 1%. But the key thing about that is, if you never test your finger prick ever with a CGM, it means that 1% of the time poses a really big risk for you, because like a lot of people with diabetes know, like, it looks like they're low and they know they're not low, so they just ignore it. But you keep doing that all the time, occasionally you are going to be really low and leave yourself in a bad position. Similarly, if you're kind of like, you're high and you don't really think that you're high, or you're in target and you feel a bit higher and you don't occasionally check, you could run into DKA. And we've maybe seen a bit of that recently with some of the instances and some of the large profile things. I just feel, for me personally, I feel like CGM's pushed us so far forward, which is brilliant. We've got 100 steps forward. Maybe with education, we just need to take half a step back and say, 0.5% of the time, you are going to get a reading, which is going to be out. So having a finger pricker with you in those instances is actually really important. It's almost like, especially if you come into diabetes nursing or diabetes education now, it'd be like, these CGMs are so amazing. Like, you don't need to finger pricks anymore. They're more accurate than finger pricks. That's actually bollocks. That's not true, because the ISO standard finger prickers are 95% within 1515. They are miles more accurate across the board. Now, are they as useful? Hell no. But I only just kind of feel like, from an education perspective, it really does need to be drilled in. There is the occasional time where you need to finger prick. And if you don't have one with you and you never have it with you, you are going to be putting yourself at an unnecessary risk. So I don't know what you feel. What do you guys think about that? That's my position, but I'm just interested to see what you think.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I have done lots of, even with pump patients, who you tell them to have a ketone meter to make sure that they can check ketones as part of the sick day rules. And so many of them don't have working ketone meters, don't have working glucose meters, don't have in-date test strips, don't even have backup insulin pens a lot of the time, because they'll let them go out of date. So people have got so used to relying on the technology that they are putting their health at risk, I think, by not having all these backups.
Yeah. Tamsin, what's your position on that?
I'm probably quite controversial, and I actually say that I am quite sad that calibrating of CGM is not seen as, a good thing, really. Everybody took away calibrating, and this was like, amazing, we took away calibrating, factory calibration and all that malarkey. And I actually don't agree, and I know I'm in a minority about that. But I just do not agree with that at all. And I think that you should be able to calibrate your CGM, or even actually be forced to calibrate it at times, because I do think that people rely on it. I mean, I had a gentleman, he was a police officer, he was a very intelligent man, and he looked at his CGM said he was high, he gave himself insulin, and he was found in his garden by a neighbor, and they had to call 999 for him. And it just goes to show it doesn't matter how clever you are or intelligent you are, you become reliant on a figure that is coming through a device that can go wrong.
The issue
Oh, sorry,
with
go on.
Sorry, the issue with calibration is that people don't do the finger prick to calibrate it. They'll calibrate it with the sensor glucose. So my son, I know for a fact, does not do a finger prick when the Simplera asks him to check what his blood glucose is, and he literally enters exactly what it says on the sensor to calibrate, which is totally pointless, I know, and really dangerous. And I keep telling him not to do that, but people are lazy and they will do that. So what's the point in having a calibration if they're just going to calibrate it wrong?
Yeah, I do
Beth?
tend to agree. I did like the calibration, and I did, a lot of patients now see that as a negative if they have to calibrate. I know when we had the smart guide, the Roche smart guide, I was like, oh, it's quite nice to be able to calibrate it in the first 24 hours or whatever, because you can actually be sure that it's, working. A lot of that comes from, like Amanda alluded to, that people, I think there still needs to be more education in primary care. But people are having that stuff taken off of their prescription because they're not using it enough. Certainly in adults, I doubt it would be the same. I hope it's not the same in children. But in adults, they have keto strips removed because they haven't ordered them in 6 months, or they have glucose strips removed because they've got a CGM and they have this. So a lot of that relies on those healthcare professionals in those healthcare settings having that education and, not taking that stuff away, making sure when they are doing an annual review, have you still got a meter and all that kind of stuff, because all that back to basic stuff seems to be being forgotten about or left behind, and it does still need to be there for those safety reasons. And it's always that one time when you least expect it, isn't it? You're on holiday and you haven't got anything or whatever, when you really need to be able to calibrate or something that is going to happen.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting point, and I don't think there's a right or wrong. Obviously, we've got a 2 for 2 here. Me and Tamsin are on the calibration with Trey and you, so we're kind of like, no, that's yesterday's news. But I think regardless of whatever position you sit with that, one thing we're all saying is you need to have an in-date meter. You need to have in-date strips. You have to have in the back of your mind that 1% of the time you are going to need to do that finger prick. And people with diabetes know, like, they look at the thing and they're kind of like, it just doesn't smell right. Like, there's no way it should be there at this point. That is the time where you need to go, do you know what? I just need to do a finger prick. And thinking about your man who's given that big dose of insulin on the high read, I'm pretty sure when he looked at it, he probably went, it's unlikely that I'm actually 15. There's no way I should be 15 or 16 at this point. That's the time where you just need to do it and be like, okay, kind of. And I think that it's almost like the lost art of finger pricking and testing. It's like, wash your hands properly. And if you are going to calibrate your machine, you have to be nerdy. You have to be like, I will wash my hands properly. I'm going to do 2 finger pricks. I'm going to take the average, because if I chuck a random number in, it's going to mess the whole thing up. So there is that to chuck in. And also, like, people just calibrate based off what the sensor is. That's fine. So there is a kind of a bit of a skill and an art to it. And I guess that's where, if you've got a machine that does give the option calibration, you do have to do a proper finger prick, wash your hands properly. Don't squeeze it to death, milk it up, and, kind of do 2 if you're going to calibrate your machine. But yeah, it's just interesting. I think, given recent events and given that we are making insulin dosing decisions and that there's more players coming to the market with different levels of quality and different levels of data, I think as a diabetes community, it's probably just a little note to go, okay, needs to have a finger pricker, needs to have a blood glucose tester in date. And occasionally I will need to do it. It might only be twice a month, but that twice a month might save me a situation like Tamsin described, or that other people have encountered. I'm not saying do a finger prick every day. I'm just saying have the ability to do one. So I think we've done that to death. So we've talked about you need a 5 out of 5. We talked about we've got 4 players. We're soon going to have 6, which is great. And we talked about 20/20 and 40/40. So we've kind of covered the basics. And if people want to kind of know more, they can go and check out the charts. So that's kind of like CGM where it's at now. But we've all just come back from the ATTD and had various different experiences. Some people saw more talks than others. Some people did more partying than others. We won't see who that is. But I am interested, because people who'll be listening will be thinking like, okay, so the ATTD is where things happen. It's where the latest information comes out. It's where the future is kind of being put in front of you. What are kind of maybe your 1 or 2 things that excited you, or you found interesting, or you may think for the future this thing's coming up is really what you're excited about?
The biggest thing that I saw, which we all went to, was the MiniMed Flex fully closed loop pump. So that looks really exciting. They don't want us to say it looks like a vape. It doesn't look like a vape. It
No.
looks like a pen.
A
Okay,
lipstick.
a lipstick. So it means that the person will not have to announce their carbohydrates.
I mean, that's pretty cool.
That's a game changer. So it's had FDA approval.
Okay.
We're waiting to see how long it's going to take to get over here.
And what was the sort of, presumably they did a test against their current standard system where you're entering stuff in, or did you just present the results of what it achieved in general? What kind of timing range percentage were you looking at?
I don't know. See, this is where we don't look at the data. We just saw it was fully closed loop and we just went, oh my God, that's amazing.
I think I did listen, to be fair. I think that when I sat there I was listening to them, I did think, they're telling me all the data from people who are probably not doing well on a hybrid closed loop. So those young people that perhaps are not bolusing, not pre-bolusing, not announcing carbs. And actually for those people, it did improve their time in range, and it did improve it like by quite a significant amount. It was like something along the lines of like 15-20%, which is significant.
Yeah.
But I would say, and I asked this of My Life because I went to the My Life presentation, and obviously they have got a fully closed loop system called Liberty, which is coming very, very soon. And I asked the same question to Roman Havorka, and I said, if you've got somebody that is actually doing really well on a hybrid closed loop pump and they want to go onto a fully closed loop, are they going to get a reduction in time in range? And they were a bit cagey, I will say, because they wouldn't sort of give me an idea of like a percentage drop. But he did say almost certainly they will get a drop in time in range. If you are at 80 plus time in range, you are going to get a drop, which I think is fine, I suppose. If, for example, you're going on holiday and you've got a good time in range and actually you want to go on holiday and you just want to relax and not have to count carbs when you're at the buffet and eat what you want, drink what you want, and let the pump do its work for 2 weeks, and then you come back home and you start announcing carbs again, I think that would be okay. But yeah, I don't know whether, and I think and also he was saying with the fully closed loop, you can still announce carbs. So you can announce and not announce, and obviously it will still try and do its thing. So, and we know the My Life algorithm is an exceptionally clever algorithm. So, and I know that they'll be working on it all the time in the future to get it better and better all the time. So I think it's an amazing starting point, because who thought even maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago that we would be at fully closed loop so quickly from being at hybrid closed loop, to be honest.
Yeah, didn't you ask Roman that question? And he was like, I never thought I'd see it.
Yeah, he said he thought it was going to be too difficult to actually do it safely without causing more hypos. So I just think it's a really exciting time in diabetes, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
So was that yours as well, Tamsin, or did you have another one lined up, or were you on a fully closed loop train as well?
I was, but we also Amanda and I went to the type 1 and GLP-1 consensus, which was like a really early morning. We had to drag ourselves out of bed really early on a Friday morning to go to that
partying the night before. May I add?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I don't feel like they actually did come out with a complete, like, it said it was going to be a consensus, but I don't feel they came out with a consensus as such. They just showed that in America, they were using it a lot more, obviously, than we are in the UK, and how they were sort of managing putting people on it. So a 20% reduction in insulin right from the start, not really going beyond 7.5 or 10 milligrams. That was probably the maximum they were doing. So, but still getting the benefits, but also making sure that you were aware of the risks of the fact that people were having a much more reduced appetite, so a higher risk of ketosis and things like that. So it was interesting in a sense that obviously America had got a lot more people probably than we do, so hundreds and hundreds of people in one centre they'd already tried GLP-1s on. So they've got the evidence base, which hopefully supports us down the line when we try and do it in the UK, because we know that people living with type 1 diabetes have nothing out there really to help them with weight loss. So that was quite interesting.
I mean, yeah, I've got to say from that point of view, I'm miles more excited about the GLP-1s than a fully closed loop. I mean, I think the fully closed loop's okay, because all they're doing is they're creating an algorithm. As soon as they see the glucose level start to rise, it's super aggressive, super aggressive, which is great. Until you've got a load of insulin on board and you actually want to move around and not sit on your ass all day, and then you're going to be in trouble because then you're going to go low. Like, that's just the way that I see it. I also see that if you're currently doing well on a pump and closed loop, why are you going to go to a fully closed loop and take a hit on the timing range? I just don't see people doing that. I think it'd be great for the people who don't bolus, who are struggling a bit with the HbA1c still of like, 8.5%, 8.59% on a hybrid closed loop. Then that kind of aggressive algorithm to me makes total sense. But I don't know. I just think it's a bit more marketing than reality for me in terms of what difference it will make. But GLP-1s on a different level, like I had Virel Shah on the podcast, and he was talking about the difference it's made to their patients, mainly from a weight loss perspective. Because when you've got type 1 and you're shoveling in 1.2 units per kilo, weight loss is just impossible. Whereas if you take this thing and you get your units per kilo down to 0.7, 0.8, all of a sudden you got a chance. And he was saying like the postprandial control is amazing, the weight loss is like brilliant, and the people are loving it because they're able to actually finally lose weight despite trying like really hard before. So I am really looking forward to seeing people in getting the opportunity. I know quite a few people, loads of people actually type 1. I've used it for a portion of time just to see what it did to my glucose levels and insulin dose, and straight away 30% reduction in insulin doses. Are much easier post meal control. So I'm definitely excited to see, hopefully at some point in the future, people with type 1. And I actually think that people with type 1 in some ways deserve it more than anyone. And the reason why I say that is, you're putting insulin from the outside from a very young age, your chances of weight management are it's really hard. It's really, really hard. So actually, if there's anyone who deserves the opportunity, if it's going to be a cost fight, if you're overweight with type 1, I feel you should be personally allowed the opportunity before people maybe who haven't been putting insulin from the outside all their life, because you've had it harder for a longer period of time. But I guess that's just my personal bias from there. So I'm excited for that. Beth, what's yours? What was your highlight?
Yeah, I suppose thinking with my community hat on and maybe giving something for any type 2 people that might be listening, I quite enjoyed the session about using hybrid closed loop for people with type 2 that need to get started on insulin and getting them titrated up really quickly to get their dose, because it's an age-old problem that we all really struggle with, titrating people up. It takes weeks and weeks and weeks. I think the data showed. Can't remember. Can you remember times where it's something like a year or something plus to actually get them to their right basal dose? And so they were putting people on hybrid closed loop, and in about 2 to 3 weeks they'd got their basal dose right, and then they took them off the hybrid closed loop. But it cut out all of that faff of a nurse ringing them every week going, yeah, go up by 2 units every 3 days. And there's a lot of inertia. Both the patient doesn't want to do it. If you try and ask them to do it for themselves, they often won't. They rely on a nurse ringing, and then a lot of nurse time. Primary care, again, certainly in my area, I know Tamsin has the same problem. Primary care don't touch insulin, so a lot of DSN time is spent just ringing these patients going, go up by 2 units. And so cutting all of that faff out, getting them on the right basal dose for them, I think within like 3 or 4 weeks, they said, was pretty astonishing and could really help improve not only for the patient, their outcomes and stuff, but also cut down on the time spent the nurses needing to ring them. So that was quite exciting. Again, I'm not sure how easy that will be to actually do it in clinical practice. I can't see it being something done, but I just thought it was a really interesting concept, and if we ever do get there, then that'll be quite an exciting thing. I was concerned that they didn't mention anything about retinopathy and anything like that, or if they had those kinds of people in their population. But yeah, I thought that was quite interesting. Quite excited as well about the ketone and glucose CGM coming out from Abbott. That would be a bit of a game changer, I think, for certain patients. Obviously not for everyone, but for patients like frail elderly patients in the community that district nurses are going out to see them, that could be really helpful for those sorts of patients, because again, we're getting lots of phone calls to DSN services every day about, do I need to check their ketone? Do I need to do this? So that would be quite helpful, I feel.
I do
So
worry about.
you're going to have Abbott and the pump companies knocking down your door. Brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah, the ladies to see.
I do worry about the continuous ketone meter for people with eating disorders.
Yeah.
And who are, manipulating their insulin to lose weight, and having that. Yes, it might keep them out of DKA, but it's not going to help, is it, with that eating disorder?
Yeah, it's
No,
going to
it'll
be.
definitely be for certain patients, won't it? I think we'll have to come up with those, but
Actually, it's an interesting tool, isn't it? Because I think there's a lot of pros for certain populations, especially your frequent flyers and DKA, the elderly, as you mentioned, the potential other populations. I think what I'm interested to see is when you start sticking these things on people, is what's the ketone level like for the average population with type 1 diabetes across the day, over a week, months, whatever? Is it that you're hitting 0.6, 0.1, 1.5 with no concern regularly, or are you not? Like, it'd be interesting to see, to find out what's the magic level on this continuous level, or how long do you need to be above that level before you should be giving you guys a call. Otherwise, this time's going to be going off and people are going to be going,
yeah.
I'm going to phone you. And like, I don't know what you're going to do. It's like, I don't know what you're going to do either. So I don't know what you're going to do.
Yeah. Exactly. It's going to make care plans very hard.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Tamsin?
I agree, because I think we see that in hospitals a lot, because obviously in hospital they do random ketones for absolutely no reason. You've got somebody with a blood sugar of like 4 point something, and they check their ketones, and like weirdly they have ketones of like 1 point something, and you're a bit like, oh well, what do I do with that? Because they've got a normal blood sugar, but they've got raised ketones, and they're in hospital. It's probably illness, it's probably starvation, but it absolutely freaks out the healthcare professionals on the ward and things like that, because obviously you've drummed into them for however many years that ketones are really bad, and you don't put people into DKA and all that sort of stuff and everything else. So I think it is going to be interesting. I mean, I would I'll be very happily sticking one on myself and seeing exactly what happens to me, and how quickly I start going into ketones, actually, depending on where my sugar levels are really, and or even in illness or something like that, how quickly it happens. Because I think it's actually really fascinating, because when you see these people, don't you, who have come in DKA, and they say, oh, I was fine an hour ago or something, and you're like, really, it really happened that quickly? And I think with that you'd be like, no, it didn't happen that quickly. Actually, you were ticking along with a ketone level of this for about 2 days or whatever, and then all of a sudden it did go crazy, because it just got beyond what it could deal with. And so I think it will be fascinating to see what you get from it.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think it's like the next frontier of sort of measurement will be there'll be a continuous ketone monitoring chart with all sorts of data analysis at the beginning of it before you get to find out what the features are. We'll look forward to that. I think my highlight, actually, I mean, I'll hold my hands up. I don't think I actually saw a session. I did way too much partying. But what I did get from the thing was about the current hybrid closed loops, and thinking about how they all are different in terms of the way that they register insulin on board, and how it's such an important thing, because the way the algorithms are set up is, if it recognizes a lot of insulin on board, it doesn't allow the system to give extra insulin when you're high, which really annoys people if you're on a control IQ and it says, oh, you've got loads of insulin on board, therefore I'm not going to give you a correction. They start doing ghost carbing, which is really annoying. But actually, when I went to their ad board, it was showing the data was, if you get their basal percentage about 60% of their total daily dose, and you weaken the carb ratios, it basically allows the algorithm to perform really, really well. So if you've got people out there who are currently on like 30% basal and 70% bolus, and they're thinking, I'm having to ghost carb all the time. It's the wrong way around. You need to kind of get the basal at 60% and weaken the carb ratios, give the algorithm a chance because you get that insulin on board right down. And that's the same principle of why you set the 780G, the active insulin time, at 2 hours, because you're trying to register no insulin on board to allow the algorithm to be really aggressive. And that's also, if you're an Omnipod 5, you want to get the active insulin down to 2 hours. So then the user boluses are gotten rid of straight away so the algorithm can be aggressive. So it doesn't really matter whichever system that you've got. What you're trying to do, if you want the algorithm to be very responsive, is get the insulin on board down. And actually, that's great. But then for the user, that does become a problem because it makes it look, when they look at their device, they're like, I've got no insulin on board, so I'm fine to do exercise. And like, oh no, I've gone low really quickly because actually physiologically I've got a load of insulin on board. So I've been working hard behind the scenes at the Glucose Analyzer to try and develop some calculators and some explorers so people can have a go. So if they go to the site and go to the AID optimizer, you can start having a play around with, oh, if I had this settings and I was this weight and I wanted to get the optimum algorithm, what would I set it at? So as DSNs or healthcare professionals, you can go and have a play with how to get the best out of these algorithms by manipulating the so-called insulin on board. But then also, what's the trade-off if you do that for the education piece? It's like, okay, we're going to make this algorithm really aggressive, but you can't trust the number of insulin on board it tells you on the screen because it's going to be way higher than that realistically. So that's been my fun of nerdiness in the background. Tamsin, you want to say something on that?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that that's really quite interesting in the sense of like how the systems work and things like that, because when we were talking to the people at My Life, they were saying about obviously people are now swapping, aren't they, between pumps, because obviously people have been on pumps for quite a while now and we're getting to the point where those people are coming up for their warranties and moving over. I've done that quite recently. So last year I was on a 780G. I've now moved over to a My Life, and mainly just because I do like trying different pumps and stuff like that and things like that. And it gives me the opportunity to be able to say to people, I've tried the 780, I've tried this pump kind of thing. And I swapped my settings. I'm a DSN. I didn't need training. I did the whole thing, do as I say, not as I do situation. And I swapped myself over. So I took my settings off my Medtronic. I whacked them in the My Life pump, and I literally hypoed all over the place. And it's the actual thing that they handed over this training, and they said, do not use the settings that you put in your Medtronic pump to put into your My Life pump because it just does not work. And I mean that was obvious straight away. It was obvious to me. My hypos went from like 3% to 30 something percent within like 24, 48 hours. I was hypoing all over the place because genuinely I think this algorithm is super aggressive. And I had to dial everything right back. My carb ratios got dialed back, and everything got dialed right back. And even my target, my BG target, I had to raise for a while just to stop it working so hard. So it's really interesting because obviously I suppose we don't necessarily think about that when we're doing it. And now, because I've experienced it, it's made me realize I don't do that for people now. I actually set them up right from as if they're starting on a pump
fresh
from fresh.
Go and have a go at the AID optimizer and maybe put what your settings were on your 780, what your total daily dose is, and have a play around with it. I'll be interested to know whether it would have saved you 30% lows or not. But because I was speaking to Candice actually from My Life, and I was saying, so basically, if someone's trying to get the optimum out of your algorithm, what's the situation? She's saying, well, you want the algorithm delivered instant to be at least 60-65%, which means you've got to really relax the carb ratios compared to what you would do in other places, because if you put too much in with the bolus, someone you're probably hypo, but you'll also reduce the flexibility of the algorithm because you've just got so much insulin on board from the boluses, it can't really do what it's supposed to do. But on other systems, that's what you want it to do. So it's kind of like, if you understand how the different systems work, you can optimize it, but then you've got like 4 different things to think of, and you're in a consultation in half an hour, or you're swapping something. Like, how am I meant to do that? It's impossible. So I've tried to develop something where you can plug some numbers in as a healthcare professional, kind of have a play around with how each system is meant to optimize things. So I'd be interested to get your feedback on that and see what you reckon. So as a wrap, I want to say thank you, first of all, for dealing with my nerdiness and hassling you guys to be like, can you just check this out? But I think between us, we've done a pretty good job at helping diabetes nurses, people with diabetes, people who pay the bills of CGMs understand it should be data sufficiency first and then features second. And then as we move forward into the sort of arenas of continuous ketone monitoring, GLP-1s, getting the best out of AID systems, maybe we'll be able to cook something else up that we can help them with. So I just want to say thank you for your time for tonight, and thank you for the great work that you do. I know loads of people listen to your podcast, and you're the place to go to for diabetes nurses, and you've put a lot of hard work in. I know you put a lot of hard work in because I'm on some WhatsApp groups with you, and you never stop. It's like, I thought I like to message. You guys like a message. You guys love a message.
Not at 3 a.m. though. We do sleep, but we're just manic when we're awake.
Is there anywhere that you would like to send the listeners to find out more about what you guys do, what you're up to, the sort of things that you do? Just because they might have listened and thought, what, these ladies have got some reality checks for things and pieces. So where would you send them to?
Our website, Diabetes Specialist Nurse Forum UK, and if you subscribe to us, you'll get more content via our newsletter, especially if you're a healthcare professional, because there's certain things we can only send to healthcare professionals, so they're under a subscription only. So do subscribe to our newsletter.
Absolutely. And obviously there's the CGM charts. If you go along to the Diabetes Specialist Nurse Forum website, you'll see them there. You can click and register. The purpose of registering is not because we want to send you stuff. It's just because when we update the chart, we would like you to have the most accurate, up-to-date information. And that certainly will be changing in terms of the number of CGMs available over the next couple of months for sure. With a score of 5 out of 5, of course, they're available, but certainly a score of 5 in terms of sub-design. So I'll let you guys get off and do what you're going to be doing on the evening, but I appreciate your time for an hour, and I'm sure this episode has been really helpful for a lot of people in terms of just getting some reality checks on CGM, thinking about carrying a finger prick meter, what's cool to come in terms of fully closed loop GLP-1s, continuous ketone monitors, and where they can find you. So I am no doubt we'll catch up with you soon.
See you later.
Thank you.